There's a moment that hits like a cold wind when someone you trusted, someone who once demanded your attention, suddenly turns away. The messages stop, the calls go unanswered, and the warmth you once felt is replaced by a sharp, empty silence. At first, it feels personal, as if their absence is a reflection of your worth. But this silence is not about you. It is the signature of a mind that thrives on control, on testing boundaries, on bending reality to serve its own fragile ego. When a narcissist ignores you after causing pain, they are not retreating because of what you did or who you are. They are retreating to protect themselves from the very reflection of their own behavior. And in that absence, in that deliberate coldness, lies a lesson waiting to be claimed. The power to understand, to heal, and to rise above the manipulation is yours to seize, if only you refuse to be defined by their shadow and instead embrace the light of your own strength. Life often presents us with people who draw us in with warmth, charm, and attention, only to leave us suspended in silence when we least expect it. The narcissist's withdrawal is rarely accidental. It is a calculated retreat, a move that transforms a room once filled with laughter and conversation into a space heavy with absence. To the outside observer, it may seem abrupt or cruel, but to the one experiencing it, it feels like a personal failing, a reflection of inadequacy. In reality, the silence is a mirror, reflecting not the worth of the one being ignored, but the inner turbulence of the one who chooses to disappear. Narcissists are masters of control. Their connections are transactional, measured in attention and validation rather than empathy. When they hurt, whether through harsh words, betrayal, or subtle manipulations, they often follow it with withdrawal. This absence is not just a pause, it is a power move. It forces the other person to confront uncertainty, to question their actions, and often to chase for clarity or reconciliation. Every unanswered message, every avoided call, is a silent assertion of dominance. It is not personal in the conventional sense, but it is profoundly disorienting because humans are wired to seek connection, to respond to social cues, and to repair broken bonds. The withdrawal is also a defense mechanism. Narcissists are fragile beneath the surface. When faced with accountability, when confronted with the reflection of their actions in someone else's pain, they retreat. Silence shields them from confrontation and allows them to avoid self-examination. By removing themselves from the equation, they maintain an illusion of control, preserving the narrative that keeps their fragile ego intact. To the person left behind, this absence feels like abandonment, but for the narcissist, it is survival. Understanding this dynamic is crucial in navigating the aftermath. Recognizing that the silence is about them, not you, is the first step toward reclaiming agency. Life is punctuated by interactions that challenge our perception of worth, and learning to see through the manipulations allows one to build resilience. When someone withdraws after causing pain, it is an opportunity to observe, to learn, and to strengthen the boundaries that safeguard emotional well-being. This pattern also reveals deeper truths about human behavior. People who repeatedly retreat after hurting others often carry unhealed wounds themselves, creating cycles of harm that repeat across relationships. Their departure, while painful, highlights the importance of self-awareness and emotional literacy in life. By witnessing the withdrawal without internalizing it as a personal failing, one begins to disentangle identity from external validation, learning that the absence of another does not equate to the absence of one's own value or purpose. In the spaces left behind, in the quiet and the uncertainty, there lies the potential to reclaim narrative and perspective. Life continues, shaped not by the manipulations of others, but by the conscious choices made in response. Observing the withdrawal with clarity, understanding its roots in insecurity and control, transforms an act designed to destabilize into a lesson in strength, discernment, and the enduring power of self-possession. In the rhythm of human relationships, there are moments that feel inexplicably sharp, moments when words or actions leave a sting that lingers long after the interaction has ended. When dealing with a narcissist, these moments are rarely accidental. Pain becomes a tool, a weapon deliberately wielded to unsettle, to destabilize, and to assert control. The hurt is precise, calculated, and often followed by a sudden absence, a retreat into silence that leaves the other person grappling with questions and doubt. Understanding this pattern is not about excusing the behavior, but about recognizing a mechanism that thrives on emotional manipulation. Narcissists derive a form of power from witnessing reactions. They observe closely as their words, gestures, and omissions ripple through the emotional landscape of those around them. Each flare of anger, each moment of confusion is a confirmation that they remain at the center of attention, that their presence, even when damaging, is still a dominant force in someone else's life. The pain inflicted is rarely random. It is tailored to exploit insecurities, vulnerabilities, and the subtle triggers that elicit the strongest responses. The goal is not connection, not understanding, but influence and often control. This pattern of causing harm before withdrawing mirrors a larger truth about human interaction. People seek significance in the reactions of others. Narcissists, however, distort this natural inclination into a mechanism for manipulation. The emotional weight left behind in the wake of hurtful behavior serves a dual purpose. It destabilizes the person on the receiving end and reinforces the narcissist's sense of dominance. The silence that follows is the final act, a pause that forces reflection, uncertainty, and sometimes even self-blame, creating a cycle where the pain lingers longer than the presence ever did. Life, however, provides a lens through which these dynamics can be understood and navigated. Experiencing deliberate hurt is a stark reminder of the importance of emotional boundaries and self-awareness. When pain is used as a weapon, the responsibility for recovery shifts to the person who feels it. Recognizing the deliberate nature of the hurt allows one to separate the action from personal worth, to see it not as a reflection of value, but as an instrument of control wielded by someone else's insecurity. In broader terms, this behavior illustrates how some individuals operate under the weight of their own unresolved fears and fragilities. By inflicting pain and then withdrawing, they create a narrative where they remain central, while others are left piecing together meaning from absence and discomfort. Observing this pattern through a clear lens transforms the experience from disempowerment into insight. It becomes an opportunity to cultivate discernment, to understand the difference between genuine connection and manipulation, and to develop the resilience required to navigate relationships with clarity. The strategic infliction of pain before retreat is a lesson in human complexity, an illustration of how influence and control can manifest in subtle, often invisible ways. Life's challenge is to confront these moments with awareness, to recognize the tactics for what they are, and to reclaim authority over one's emotional response, turning an experience designed to weaken into an exercise in strength, self-knowledge, and the careful curation of one's own emotional. landscape. In the intricate dance of human relationships, there are moments when silence speaks louder than words, when absence communicates more than presence ever could. When a narcissist chooses to ignore after causing pain, it is not a reflection of your actions or your value. It is a mirror, a projection of their own insecurity cast onto the canvas of someone else's life. The emptiness they leave behind, the deliberate avoidance, is less about you and more about the fragility of the persona they strive so hard to maintain. Understanding this mirror effect is crucial in reclaiming clarity and perspective in life. Narcissists live in a world where perception is reality. Their sense of self is fragile, dependent on constant validation, and vulnerable to the discomfort of accountability. When confronted with the consequences of their behavior, when faced with someone who challenges their narrative, they retreat into silence. Ignoring becomes a shield, a way to avoid the reflection of their own flaws and insecurities. It is not passive. It is a calculated act that creates an illusion of control, leaving the other person scrambling to interpret, question, and justify. Every unanswered message and every avoided interaction is a projection of their inner unease, a way to externalize discomfort rather than face it internally. Life teaches that projection is not confined to narcissists alone, but the intensity and intentionality of it in these relationships can feel disorienting. Humans are wired to respond to social cues, to seek resolution and understanding, and to repair ruptures in connection. The narcissist exploits this natural inclination, using silence and avoidance to magnify uncertainty and self-doubt. In doing so, they expose a fundamental truth about their own psyche. Insecurity drives behavior. The hurt inflicted and the subsequent withdrawal are less about asserting dominance over another and more about preserving a fragile identity from exposure. Recognizing this dynamic is transformative. Understanding that their ignorance reflects their own inner turmoil rather than your shortcomings allows one to step back and reclaim personal power. Life is full of mirrors, some showing our strengths, others revealing our vulnerabilities. When someone deliberately ignores you, it can be reframed not as a judgment on your worth, but as a glimpse into their unresolved fears. Observing this without internalizing the intended disruption enables growth, resilience, and emotional autonomy. The mirror effect also illustrates a broader principle of human behavior. People often respond to discomfort by deflecting, by shifting focus away from themselves and onto the external world. In relationships with narcissists, this manifests as silence, withdrawal, or calculated avoidance. The emotional impact on those left behind is significant, yet it is in observing the behavior with clarity that one can find liberation. Life presents opportunities to discern the difference between reflection and projection, between genuine in connection and the distortions of insecurity. In the spaces carved by their absence, there lies a subtle invitation to witness the projection, to recognize the insecurities behind it, and to respond with awareness rather than reaction. By seeing the mirror for what it is, one begins to navigate relationships with a new understanding of human complexity, turning moments designed to destabilize into lessons in perception, strength, and the capacity to stand undiminished in the face of deliberate ignorance. In life, there comes a moment when the weight of another person's actions no longer defines your sense of self, when the patterns of manipulation and silence that once held you captive begin to loosen. Reclaiming power after encountering a narcissist's hurtful behavior is not a single act. It is a process, a deliberate and often challenging journey to untangle your identity from the influence of someone else's control. Every withdrawal, Every deliberate slight is an opportunity to examine the chains that have been quietly wrapped around your emotional landscape, to recognize where attachment has been confused with dependence, and to begin the work of liberation. The first step is awareness. Understanding the dynamics at play allows one to see the separation between their own worth and the manipulations imposed by another. Narcissists thrive on confusion, on the uncertainty they create, and on the emotional turbulence they orchestrate. By observing these patterns without self-blame, you gain clarity. The realization that silence, avoidance, and manipulation are tactics rather than reflections of your value is empowering. It marks the beginning of reclaiming the narrative, the moment when your emotional sovereignty is acknowledged and defended. Breaking the chains also requires intention. It is the conscious decision to refuse the pull of guilt, doubt, and overthinking that the absence of a narcissist often provokes. Life presents endless possibilities for engagement and fulfillment, yet when caught in the gravity of manipulation, attention becomes narrowed, and energy is consumed by reactions rather than creation. By redirecting focus toward personal growth, toward relationships that nurture rather than destabilize, one begins to construct an environment where peace is cultivated, where presence is chosen rather than coerced, and where autonomy is celebrated rather than compromised. Equally vital is the cultivation of emotional resilience. Life is rarely devoid of challenge, and interactions with difficult personalities are part of a larger human tapestry. Each experience with withdrawal, each moment of hurt, becomes a lesson in discernment. By observing patterns without succumbing to the emotional turbulence they induce, one develops an inner stability that no external force can easily disrupt. This resilience is not an absence of feeling. It is a mastery of response, an understanding that power lies not in controlling others, but in regulating one's own mind and heart. Freedom is found in boundaries. Recognizing limits, articulating needs, and enforcing personal standards are acts of self-respect that slowly dismantle the influence of those who seek to dominate. Life rewards those who honor themselves, and the practice of asserting boundaries transforms vulnerability into strength. In learning to step back from manipulation, to disengage from emotional games, one discovers the quiet but profound satisfaction of self-possession. The journey of reclaiming power is both internal and external. It involves reflection, courage, and the willingness to release attachments to what was never meant to serve your well-being. In embracing this process, in prioritizing peace over conflict, presence over absence, and authenticity over performance, one moves beyond the chains imposed by others. Life becomes a space not defined by manipulation but by conscious choice, by the deliberate cultivation of strength, serenity, and the unwavering assertion of one's own value in a world that often seeks to obscure it. In the quiet that follows a narcissist's withdrawal, there exists a space both unsettling and revealing, a space where absence speaks louder than words ever could. Hurt lingers in these moments, echoing through thoughts and emotions, testing the boundaries of patience, resilience, and self-belief. Life often presents such challenges not as punishments, but as mirrors of opportunity, opportunities to observe, to reflect, and ultimately to transform vulnerability into strength. The silence that is meant to destabilize can instead become the crucible in which courage is forged. When someone deliberately retreats after causing pain, the initial response is often confusion, self-doubt, and the temptation to seek explanations that may never come. This is the human tendency to seek closure, to restore equilibrium when it has been disrupted. But in relationships with manipulative individuals, the closure rarely arrives from the other party. The lesson emerges from within. Each moment of hurt carries a choice: to internalize it, letting it erode confidence and perspective, or to use it as a lens to examine the dynamics of influence, control, and personal boundaries. Recognizing that the silence is a reflection of another's limitations rather than your own deficiencies is the first step toward empowerment. Life teaches that strength is rarely granted. It is built through consistent practice, reflection, and resilience. Transforming hurt into strength requires embracing discomfort without surrendering to it. It requires observing the patterns of manipulation with clarity, understanding the motives behind the withdrawal, and separating the actions of another from the definition of self. In doing so, the emotional weight of absence loses its grip. The energy once consumed by uncertainty and reaction is redirected toward growth, self-care, and the pursuit of authentic connections that reinforce rather than diminish. The process is also an exercise in self-compassion. Life demands that we nurture our emotional well-being even when others fail to acknowledge it. By acknowledging pain without judgment, by allowing grief or frustration to exist without letting it dictate behavior, one begins to reclaim agency. The silence, intended as a tool of control, becomes instead a mirror reflecting resilience, revealing the capacity to navigate adversity without losing equilibrium. Each deliberate pause, each moment of reflection, builds a foundation of strength that is impervious to external manipulation. Resilience grows not in avoidance but in active engagement with life's challenges. It flourishes in the recognition that relationships, no matter how intense or painful, are not the measure of personal worth. Life presents opportunities to redirect focus from absence to presence, from despair to determination, and from reaction to intentional action. By transforming hurt into insight and insight into deliberate strength, one cultivates a sense of autonomy that no silence, no manipulation can undermine. In this transformation, pain ceases to be a weapon wielded by others and becomes a teacher guiding toward growth. Strength emerges not from avoiding hurt, but from confronting it, learning from it, and allowing it to illuminate the contours of resilience. Life in its complexity offers moments of withdrawal, absence, and challenge, but within these moments lie the seeds of empowerment, the capacity to rise beyond the silence, and the potential to build an inner fortitude that remains unshaken, unclaimed by the manipulations of others, and grounded in the enduring truth of self-worth. In the aftermath of hurt and silence, there is a choice that defines the path forward. You can allow the absence of another to diminish your light, or you can use it as fuel to ignite your own. Every moment of withdrawal, every deliberate act of pain, carries within it the opportunity to reclaim power, to strengthen boundaries, and to see yourself clearly without distortion. The world may offer manipulations, misunderstandings, and the coldness of those who seek control, but it also offers the possibility of resilience, growth, and clarity. True strength is not measured by how much we endure silently, but by how we rise after being tested. When you refuse to internalize another's absence, when you turn pain into insight and confusion into wisdom, you step into a space of freedom that cannot be taken. You become the author of your own narrative, no longer defined by the manipulations of others, but by the courage, awareness, and integrity you bring to each moment. In the silence left behind, you discover your own voice. In the hurt once imposed, you find your own power, and in every shadow cast by their absence, you create light that belongs solely to you, light that guides you forward, unshakable, unbound, and undeniably whole.